...2021 começou mergulhada em desafios. No meio de uma das piores pandemias da nossa história, o vírus desfalcou famílias, paralisou economias, exigiu novas respostas do sistema de saúde do país. Para seguirmos em frente e chegarmos ao final deste ano com esperanças renovadas no futuro, tivemos que nos munir de muito trabalho e determinação para somar forças e multiplicar os resultados. O desafio é o maior que nós, de Biomanguinhos, já enfrentamos, mas somos incansáveis. Sabemos que a ciência é um instrumento em defesa da vida. Cada vida salva é um presente que faz tudo valer a pena. Nos munimos de informações confiáveis, desenvolvimento tecnológico de ponta e muita, mas muita dedicação para diagnosticar a doença e fabricar a esperança em forma de vacina. Ao mesmo tempo, mantivemos o Sistema Único de Saúde abastecido com outras vacinas, kits e biofármacos. Agora, colhemos os resultados. Os números da pandemia diminuem na proporção em que o próximo ano vem se desenhando cheio de oportunidades para sermos melhores. E queremos fazer ainda mais. Aumentar a cobertura vacinal no país, oferecer novas possibilidades de diagnósticos precisos, ampliar o tratamento a pacientes com doenças raras, oncológicas, crônicas e autoimunes. Que venha 2022 com ideais para transformarmos, com transformações para inovarmos e com mais vacina no braço, sorriso no rosto e a certeza de que seguimos evoluindo e fazendo a diferença na vida de milhões de brasileiros. Juntos, transformamos mais.
Olá, boa tarde. Bem-vindos ao
Good afternoon. Welcome to our third and last day of the International Symposium on Immunobiologicals. We are going to start the panel number 4, that is self-testing for STIs, other health problems, and COVID-19. Our first speaker is Mariana Vilares. Mariana is a master in engineering, management, and innovation. She has 14 years of experience in health management and 8 years leading the responsible team for the diagnosis of STIs, HIV, and viral hepatitis in Brazil. Mariana, welcome. Hello, can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be in this event. For these 3 days, we've heard many different and interesting things. And this symposium has turned 46, doing a lot for public health in our country. So it's a pleasure and a great joy for me to be here. I noticed that many are smiling at me, and I'm happy because of that as well. And I'm going to talk about the strategy of the unified health system to distributing the HIV test as a strategy to expand diagnosis. The slides are in English. I'm going to speak in Portuguese due to simultaneous translation. I think this is going to work for everyone. Firstly, I'd like to contextualize HIV in Brazil. In Brazil, we have approximately 936,000 living with HIV, and Brazil is a country with great social differences. The epidemic in the country is concentrated in some key populations, the most vulnerable populations acquiring the HIV virus. We don't have a generalized epidemic as Africa does. This population that is most affected by HIV faces barriers to access health services, and the epidemic is also growing among young people, not only in the country, but in the entire world. So I brought to us this overview about the prevalence of HIV in Brazil. It's 0.4 in general population, but in some populations it's very high. For instance, in gays and other men who have sex with men is 18.4%, this prevalence. In sexual professionals of the female sex is 5.3%. In trans women is almost 17%. So these populations are the populations that are the most affected in a different way by the epidemic of HIV in Brazil. We also have this overview of growing this diagnosis since 2012 until 2020. 69% were diagnosed in 2012, and in 2020 we have 88. And most certainly this growth is due to the implementation of the fast test of HIV in the walk-in clinics that we have, and we distribute from the Ministry of Health 14 million fast tests for HIV every year for the unified health system. So now we have a challenge. If we have 88% of the population diagnosed, we have to reach 12%. It's a small percentage. So how can we enhance diagnosis so that we can get to 90, 95, or 100%, that would be the ideal. So considering that we have to reach only the 12% missing, and that the epidemic is concentrated and we need focus, and that the most vulnerable population has a hardship to access the service, so we have to give access to these people. Since 2018, we have been distributing for free the self-testing of HIV at the Unified Health System. According to WHO, it's an additional step to enhance the autonomy of the patient, decentralize the services, and create demand for the HIV testing for those who are not reached by the health services. And since 2016, the WHO recommends that the HIV test is offered as an additional strategy for the testing service, never replacing the 14 million rapid tests by the unified health system, but it's an additional strategy to reach this population that is not being able to be reached. So what's a self-test of HIV? It's a process in which the person collects their own sample that could be a blood sample, and they perform the test, and they interpret the results alone or with someone they trust anywhere they want. So the self-test is an additional strategy for those who are not willing to test in front of other people. We know that there's a lot of stigma, so many people don't want to test in front of other people. It's an important strategy for that. It's an additional strategy for those who don't want to access the health service. It brings autonomy in health decision making. So the individual is able to decide where, when, and with whom they want to take the test. And it enables a great capillarity to enhance the access to testing. And the self-test is not providing a definitive diagnosis. If you have a positive result, you must look for the public health system or a health system to have the additional tests that are at least 2 fast tests. So talking about self-test of HIV in Brazil, in 2015, Anvisa, the agency, started uh, permitting the self-test registered in Brazil, and only in 2017 the first self-test was registered in the country. And in December 2018 we launched the website dedicated. The Ministry of Health has launched this website dedicated to self-test. And in December 2018, we started this pilot project of this distribution self-test in the Unified Health System that lasted for the entire 2019. And then we enhanced it for the entire Brazil. So any health service can have this self-test to distribute in the Unified Health System. And in April 2020, we enhanced the recommendations concerning the self-test due to the social distancing recommendations due to COVID-19. So what is the Ministry of Health strategy? The objective is to reach the non-diagnosed people, the 12%. The focus is the key population, the priority population that is not reached by the health service. And the main strategies are the distribution outside the health system, because if they are in the health system, they can test there. And the secondary distribution, when someone receives the self-test to take to a peer or a sexual partner from the key population. And that enables a greater capillarity of the test. So someone who is in the health service is able to take to someone else, who is able to deliver to a third person that could benefit from this strategy. What are the 3 main strategies? The distribution for peers and partners. I don't know. So it's the prophylaxis before the exposition, the PrEP ones, taking pills not to contract HIV, even using preservatives. And those in PrEP people, they take care of their health because they are concerned if they are having quarterly consultations, they are concerned about their health, and they're in a community in a mean that is a population at risk. So at each PrEP consulting, they take this medication, and they can take the self-test to peers and partners that could benefit from this strategy. The second main strategy is the distribution in places of sociability of the key population that can be made by health professionals or NGOs. So we have distribution in places of prostitution, populations that can hardly access the health services due to stigma or discrimination, or places where men have sex with men, or trans population. We go to the streets and we distribute for this population. And our third strategy is the secondary distribution for those who are tested in the health services. So I go to the health service, I have my HIV test, and I can test to my peers or my partners that could benefit from this strategy. So I brought some images, and I don't know if it's easy for you to see, but about some situations where the self-test has been distributed. For instance, the gay parade, we have a picture of trans people holding their tests. We have also samba rehearsals for the samba parade in Rio, a PrEP consultation, an RV outside of the health service. We have some news pieces about that, about the distribution of the self-test. And what's the strategy? The person can take 1 self-test for themselves and up to 5 self-tests for partners and peers. Concerning communication, we have a document of guidelines to be distributed in public health. We organize the services so that they could guarantee the service for those who had a positive test. Someone who tested positive in the self-test, they can't have an answer tomorrow. because there's no one to confirm the test. They have to be seen at that precise moment, because if it's a strategy for us to reach a population that we are not able to reach, if we are able to reach that population and they went to the public service, they have to be immediately be cared. They can't receive this news of returning tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So we had to organize the health services very well to organize that. We have a free phone, a hotline with a professional answering if you have doubts about your test. And we have this we have the step-by-step on how to read the test with images and a QR code for a video. And in the leaflet, you may find the information about the free treatment and what to do in case it's positive. This is the website. I won't delve into details, but you may find everything about self-test in the world and in Brazil, in the unified health system. There are videos, frequently asked question sessions. The main doubts of different people are there on the website, and we also try to observe the quality of the test. So we guarantee the quality of the test, we guarantee the training of the professionals who are distributing. We have frequent meetings with these professionals. We have monthly meetings to discuss all the self-test issues with the providers. All the tests that we purchase and we distribute are registered by the agents, the health agency, of course, and we update the technical requirements according to what we heard from the professionals who distribute, and with the monthly calls so that in the user calls. And we have the analysis of all the batches that are analyzed by the National Institute of Quality Control. So only after their evaluation of the quality services do we distribute the tests. We monitor this distribution strategy and also the perception of the users. We have anonymous questionnaires that are filled out when the users, they retrieve their tests or on the website, and we have some results. Over the months, we had the distributed self-test. There's an arrow to show that we were growing. And then we had the social distancing guidelines and it fell. And so the testing fell, but we started incentivizing the distribution of self-test to maintain the supply of tests for that population, that risk population, because they couldn't come to the health services due to social distancing. So there was a boom in the distribution of the self-test, and we didn't have it in our stocks until we had the next purchase when the distribution increased again. So this is the number of municipalities participating in the. We have 256 municipalities in the strategy of self-test, and the main results: 442 self-tests distributed, 149 forms filled out. Each person can take a test for themselves and up to 5 for peers and partners. 42% reached the population between 18 and 29 years old. It's harder for us to reach this population, so they are obtaining the tests. This bar graph is showing us that 20% of the people who retrieved this self-test had never tested for HIV before. We are showing that we are being able to reach a population that we never reached before. And between 18 and 24 years old, 28% never tested before. Concerning race and color, it's half-half, 49% white and yellow, 50% Black people, and 1% indigenous people. About gender identity, we are mainly distributing for men who have sex with men, and we have this note about 5% of distribution for trans people. That is a higher number than we can distribute at the health system. It's a small number, but due to the incidence, the average of tests by people who are treating is slightly different. So people who are in PrEP or are retrieving for partners and peers, they retrieve more tests than those at the street. And to wrap up, concerning the perception of the user, we have a questionnaire with a few answers, only 813 compared to the 450,000 tests distributed, but they entered the website, they tested, and they put their perceptions. 45% were men having sex with men, 50% were young people between 18 and 24 years old, 45% had reported unprotected anal text, 32% were people who had never been tested before. 46% was this younger population. The great majority did the test by themselves or with a partner or a friend, and most of them retrieved for free at SUS, but it's for sale in the pharmacies. 96% thought it was easy to do, 98% would do it again, 99% would recommend for a friend. Last slide. 28% of the people who answered our questionnaire on the website reported to have a positive result. They are 3.4%, and the prevalence in Brazil is 0.4% in general population. And from these people, 79 informed that they have gone to the public service to have the reagent tests. It doesn't mean that 25% didn't look for the health service, but up to that moment, they didn't. The main advantages were privacy and personal empowerment. To conclude, the self-test of HIV is acceptable, easy to do. It has been reaching successfully the populations that had never been tested before, the young population and the key populations. People prefer to test by themselves or with health professionals. And most people have been looking for the public service after a positive result. We need some efforts to reach more the trans population, which is a population that we need to work with. And we intend to expand to other municipalities. And lastly, it's a great challenge to be able to identify if the self-test is really increasing the diagnosis, so that we know that the population is taking the test, but how to be sure that the diagnosis is being enhanced due to that, because we don't have control about the tests that are being made outside the health services. I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigada, Mariana.
Thank you, Mariana. And now to complement our panel, I'd like to call Marcela Abreu. Marcela is a Master in Public Administration through the Getúlio Vargas Foundation. She has a specialization in biotechnology from the Federal University of Lavras, and she has a specialization in health surveillance through the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. She's also a manager of the Office of In Vitro Medical Devices at Anvisa, and she has experience in quality systems and risk management for medical devices. So her work is focused on regulation, science, technology, and innovation in health. So Marcela, you have the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for the invitation to take part in this event. It's a pleasure to be in a place where new researchers and health professionals are born. That is, people who actually chose to work with health. And I think that this is a choice that involves a great deal of responsibility. And it's also a choice that brings up a lot of interest. And that's something that's positive. So I really love the health sector. That was a choice of mine, but I understand that besides responsibility, it brings us a lot of challenges. So I was invited to talk to you a little bit more about a topic, which is the regulatory framework in Brazil, especially in relation to the regulation of in vitro diagnostic devices. This is not a very friendly topic, but usually people who have this impression are people who don't know about the role of regulation. Regulation is supposed to work together with the development of products so that we can have good results in a safe way, and so that we can get the return that we expect from this development. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about the Brazilian regulatory framework. So we have the National Health Surveillance System, and in a country of continental dimensions, this system works at the three government levels. So at the federal level, we have the Ministry of Health, we have the Brazilian Health Surveillance Agency, which is Anvisa, we have the National Health Council, and we also have the participation of INCQS, which is the National Institute of Health Quality Control, which is linked to Fiocruz. At the state level and municipal level, we also have some other health structures, such as the councils and the health departments, and we have the health surveillance at the state and municipal level. They have an important role. And at the state level, we also have the Central Public Health Laboratories, which are the LACENs. So what do we need to know from the system? Anvisa has the responsibility to coordinate this whole health surveillance system. But this is a system that works in a decentralized fashion. So what does that mean? That means that each sphere of government has the autonomy to propose control rules and rules related to surveillance, which may be applied within their domain. So just to understand a little bit about this, all of these activities were linked to the National Health Surveillance System. Basically, besides being the coordinator of the system, Anvisa works on a lot of different fronts. So it's responsible for regulating not just health products, but also food, medications, cosmetic products, sanitizing agents, pesticides, cells, organs, and it's also responsible for the control of central analytical laboratories, tobacco regulation, the control of travelers, ports, airports, and borders, and that also works with post-market surveillance. And she works also with international agencies, and she works with monitoring. So, and it's got its post-market activities. So it works on a lot of different fronts. And how does this regulations team work? Well, the activities are grouped into two sets. We've got the pre-market activities, which are those that happen before a product is released to the market. And then we've got post-market activities, which are those activities related to products that are released into the market. So related to pre-market activities, we've got four things which are very important, which are requirements for a company that's developing a product to request a registration or notification. So the first thing is the authorization of the installation, so that we can understand what they're trying to do, whether that's related to manufacturing or importing. So people who work in the health sector need to know the criteria that are required to work with these kinds of products. Then there's the part related to GMP certification that involves not just certification itself, but the rules related to this process. So it's focused on the manufacturing complex. Then we've got the clinical evidence, which is the set of information which will show that the product was developed and that it meets the purposes for which it was created. And a lot of times we've got stages that involve certification of evaluation of third parties. So in the health sector, this means other institutions. But for the case of in vitro diagnostics, we're talking about the participation of INCQS for a specific group of products. So these pre-market and post-market activities are dynamic activities. So they retrofeed each other. They're not static. So in terms of post-market activities, we've got all of the activities related to changes in the process of registration and notification. We've got the revalidation of the registration, which is something that happens for a specific category of products that I'm going to talk a little bit more afterwards. And we also have two other activities, which may involve monitoring programs, which is the follow-up of these products in the marketplace. And then we've got post-market surveillance, which is what we call techno-surveillance. And that has to do with complaints and adverse effects. So these activities and the knowledge about this information is used in the evaluation of information linked to the registration notification of products. So for those who are interested to regulate and register a product within the agency, these people need to know the 5 steps that are involved and that are necessary to regulate or to register a product. So the first step is related to the establishment. So the establishment needs to have an operating license, needs to have, and needs to meet good manufacturing practices. So once this phase is over, then you need to go to the second step, which is a type of submission that will be submitted. So we have a lot of different types of petitions or requests. They may registration requests, notification requests. So you have to understand the kind of request that you're making, and you need to follow the checklist, which is a set of documents that will be linked to each type of request. So the third step is the submission of the request. So the documentation is attached to the submission request, and this is done electronically. The fourth step would be the assessment done by the agency, Anvisa. So the agency will check whether the requirements were met or whether there's the need to request additional information. And the last step is to make the decision known. So this can be done electronically through the internet, through the page of our agency, or it can be done through information published in the official ledger, in the official journal. So we've got the publication of the authorization or non-authorization of the product. So when we're talking in relation to IVD products, we have some resolutions which are important in relation to these products. So our biggest regulation, the technical regulation for in vitro diagnostic equipment is RDC 36 from 2015. It brings criteria of risk classification and all of the requirements necessary to register the product. So besides this, there are other resolutions which are important for you to know about, especially if you want to work with IVDs. So we've got normative ruling 03, which talks about the requests related to grouped products. And we have 2 other resolutions which are related to RDC 36, and those are related to auto self-tests. So in resolution 36, we have an article that talks about the products that cannot be sold as self-tests. So this is an exclusionary article. And within those products which cannot be sold as self-tests, we've got equipment related to tumors and the heart, and we have products related to diseases that require notification. And that's because there's an article, there's a paragraph that requires an exclusion when there's a public interest involved. And so this needs to be addressed by a public policy that's agreed by the Ministry of Health and Anvisa. So some people ask us why this is necessary. And we need to remind people that there's a proposal, which is health surveillance, which is exactly where we collect information. And again, that's why we have mandatory notification. And this is so that you can adopt strategic measures to deal with that specific situation. So this type of knowledge is necessary so that we can coordinate correctly the strategic measures which may revert the situation in benefit of the population. So we worked on RDC 52, which deals with self-tests for HIV. So this regulation brings criteria which includes, besides all of these pre and post-test information, it includes things related to the immunological window, and also the activities that need to be done in relation to the different kinds of results. Recently, we also did some work related to the coronavirus. So in this case, we're talking about the antigen self-test. So this resolution also brings criteria which are linked to the Ministry of Health's public policies. So I'd like to give you just a quick overview of what the coronavirus demand was like. In this period, during the pandemic, we had more than 1,100 requests to register products related to SARS-CoV-2. Amongst those 1,100, I'm just including primary requests. This doesn't include the viral panels or products combined with other viruses. So we're talking about products exclusively for coronavirus. And we had a percentage of 67%. 67% of these requests were approved. 25% did not get approval. They didn't meet the minimum requirements to register the product. And amongst these requests, at the end of January, we had the approval of the COVID self-test. And since then, 10% of everything that we've received in the past 2 years are requests specifically related to self-tests. So these are the numbers that we have in relation to the tests that we have for SARS-CoV-2. And right now, we already have 29 approved self-tests for follow-up. In RDC 36, you can get to know the classification rules for products. This is based on international criteria, which brings different risk levels. And the risk levels go from 1 to 4, risk being the lowest risk. And the main difference between these two is related to the amount of information that needs to be presented. So in terms of documentation, risk 1 and risk 2 products need notification. They have more simple requests, and the validity is permanent, so you don't need to request revalidation. And in relation to good manufacturing practices, the manufacturing complexes need to meet and understand these good manufacturing practices, but they don't need to prove certification. And this is not the case for products that for other kind of products. These other products that have a higher risk, they need more documentation, and the validity of the registration is 10 years. So what does our agency validate in terms of in vitro diagnostics? Well, we've got a set of information that deals with information related to the company, information related to the product. We also need to evaluate the risk management, which is applied to that specific product. We evaluate the production process by means of the flow of the production flow chart. We try to understand the manufacturing plants involved, who's responsible for what, and what controls are involved in each stage. We verify the good manufacturing practices criteria. We get to know the products by means of images and all of this, because these are documents that are necessary. And we also have issues related to labels. Now, related to performance, we've got a lot of studies that need to be done to show that that product meets the purpose for which it was developed. So we've got stability studies, we've got precision studies, stability, specificity studies, the definition of the cutoff period, the information related to the hook effect. And in relation to self-test, we also have an additional factor, which is the issue related to the usability of that product. So the usability assay is not evaluating the device itself, but rather the interaction of the user with that device and his or her interpretation of the information in the developed by made available by the product. The INCQS does some analysis of some products. So these are usually products used in blood banks. And INCQS is also doing the evaluation of products related to dengue, chikungunya, and we also have the test for SARS-CoV-2.
But concerning the health field, we are always working with this unlimited environment. So the researcher is always questioning, always seeking solutions. They work with the needs, they observe, and in several moments we see that we are going to see the emergence of new technologies, new possibilities of application, and So we must be prepared for the future so that we can know all the possibilities. And this is the role of regulation, to be able to work, access, equity, knowledge. We must observe the informations concerning safety, performance, risk, and control activities. So the role of regulation in innovation is to be a partner so that we can have a good balance between all these points. So if you are willing to work with something that is innovative in the field of diagnosis, we have the clinical investigation that is sometimes specific. We have the resolution 448 from 2021, that is the 548, that is a republishment of the resolution 10 from 2015. So you have to submit to the agency and they will follow up the clinical investigations concerning the in vitro diagnosis. So this is a final picture just to remind us that the diagnosis has a great impact in terms of health. So it's a North Star in terms of health, because it's part of the diagnosis and the monitoring of a condition of a patient that is in hospital facing that health condition, and also for developing of new products that could be used for the treatment, for the prevention, for the control and diagnosis. So this is a field that is always expanding, it's not limited, and is very relevant concerning handling the patient decisions. So these were the main pieces of information that I wanted to convey to you. Thank you, Marcela. Both presentations were very interesting in this panel for diagnosis reactives. I would like to reinforce that the online participants can send their questions using the chat box on the app, and the participants here face-to-face, they can raise their hands, and then we are going to circulate the mic or a piece of paper for you to write down your question. I have a question here coming from the app. That's about the subject that we are discussing here. And it's for both of you. Aline Oliveira is asking, the self-test makes it easier to have your diagnosis from the individual standpoint. When we look at the healthcare, public healthcare standpoint and definition of health policies, they are also important. So how is the data collected for this end here in Brazil? A little bit of what we discussed previously, right? The self-test is making the access easier, but it diminishes the control. So Mariana, thank you for the question. Yes, this is a common question. That's exactly what Rosana said. For us to be able to reach more people, we need to wave control. Because if we control too much, we are not able to expand the testing and the access to testing. So for instance, when we start a process and we have the pilot project, we thought about the questionnaire for those who were receiving the test. So during the pilot, we included questions, removed some of the questions because we want information. It was a pilot project, so we needed the information about the test. But when we exaggerate about the questions, they don't want to take the test anymore. If I have to answer such a long questionnaire, I will go away. I don't want that. But if you ask too little, you have no information about where you're getting to. So today we only have 6 questions. It's an anonymous questionnaire. This is an important point. We cannot require the name, otherwise they don't want to take the self-test, especially for HIV tests. If they have to provide their names, they don't want to take it. We only have the demographic questions, sexuality questions, and the last time you had your HIV test. So we don't have much information, but it's enough for us to monitor our strategy. So we either have a lot of reach and few and little information, or a lot of information and we don't have reach. So it's a balance, because people are taking their test home. We cannot control the result of everyone, and that won't be possible. That's why the self-test is a screening test. They must go to the healthcare service to have their flow chart and conclude that diagnosis. I wanted to add to what Mariana just said. There's a purpose for that, for us to link that to the public health, because this strategy must be very well outlined. When we discussed the self-test with the Ministry of Health, the purpose was to reach an audience that was not in the public service or in the health service. So this is the strategy of making available the self-test. And we were able to reach a population that didn't even know about their health conditions. So within this public policy, it's a strategy that is being successful. So we could have this follow-up of numbers. This is important for actions to be taken. But if we cannot reach this audience, it's not, it doesn't work. So none of the self-tests approved today has this purpose of being the final evaluator. We have several factors that must be evaluated, and this user must confirm their diagnosis. But in a strategic case, in the case of coronavirus, even if the data cannot be effectively collected with the self-test, although we had a possibility to monitor that result, we have the main action that is start with the isolation of that person and reduce the spreading of the virus. So this is the assumption that we've been working with the intention of reach that must be monitored, that if in fact we are going to get better results or the one that we are expecting. So the link must concern this strategy of actions, and this will be reached even if you're not able to collect the data so that you can take an action. So the data itself is lost, but you're able to have results in return, and this is most important for public health. Perfect. We have time for another question. Denise Maria is asking, the result of HIV self-test can be considered as a T1, and how is it integrated to the testing algorithm? Is this a trend? Is there a trend for self-tests for other populations replacing the traditional tests? Good question as well. The answer is no. The self-test cannot be considered the first test in the flow chart. So the flow chart consists in 2 fast tests, and then you have the diagnosis by a health professional. The self-test is not considered as the first test. If you come to the public service saying that you had a positive self-test, you have to take 2 other tests to complete your flow chart. And this is important for the professional providing the diagnosis. One thing is to receive the test results, but another thing is receiving this information from the person. Maybe they could have interpreted the results in the wrong way. So the function of the self-test, the HIV self-test, is to take that person to the public health service to start from scratch, as if it's a person who came to test. And there's no trend in using self-test to replace the tests in the public service, at least not now. And the unified health system acquires 14 million of self-tests or rapid tests, T1, costing R$1.20. And the self-test, the last time we bought it, it costed 19.99. 20 reais practically. So we don't want to replace. We only want to reach someone who is not being able to reach the service. If it's being used for a general population, it's not cost effective, so it makes no sense. Okay. Mariana also put her in her presentation that the self-test is seen as an additional measure. For any parameter it's linked to, it's an additional measure. We see this market trend. There's this greater interest in finding parameters that can be used for self-testing. Of course, there's this great concern from the agency concerning how the information is reaching the user, because the user must know what they're testing, if they need the test, and so on, because they won't have a health assistance and so on. So as replacing the professional assay, there's no chance for that. The great part of analytical errors, that can be concerning the pre-analytical phases, the form of conservation of the product. There are several factors that must be outlined for us to have the safety and the guarantee of that results as a diagnosis and a final result. That's why they are considered screening testing. I have Claudia Lamarca asking me to tell you that the presentations were excellent. We have another question, but unfortunately we won't be able to ask them because we are out of time, but we guarantee that we are going to send the questions to you and you might answer in writing. And I'd like to thank you so much, Mariana, Marcela. It was very good to be here with you. You brought excellent presentations to this panel for in vitro use. And now we are going to the next presentation. We have the oral presentation of poster number 7, that is about the in vitro diagnosis, and the title is New Approaches for Recombinant Proteins for HIV Production and Characterizations based on micro RSA. The author is Michel Sucupiras from Biomanguinhos.